Give me the rifle. The words cut through the gunfire like a blade. For half a second, no one moved. Dust rolled across the canyon floor in brown waves. Chips of stone snapped from the rock wall above their heads. Somewhere higher on the ridge, an enemy sniper fired again, and the sound cracked through the valley with cold precision. Petty Officer Cole Maddox lay on his side behind a broken slab of limestone, one hand pressed tight against his wounded shoulder. His rifle was still beside him, half buried in red dust, the scope catching a thin flash of sunlight. Mara Ellis crawled toward him on her elbows. She was not supposed to be there. Not beside the lead sniper. Not under direct fire. Not reaching for a weapon everyone on the team had been told only Maddox was cleared to use. She was the ammunition carrier. That was what they called her. Not officially. Never in front of command. But in the quiet moments before missions, when helmets were clipped and magazines were checked, the nickname floated around with half smiles and low voices. Ammo girl. Pack mule. Supply shadow. Mara had heard all of it. She had never answered. Now her face was streaked with dust and sweat. Her helmet sat low over her eyes. A torn strap from her pack dragged behind her as she moved across the ground, inch by inch, while bullets carved the air above her. Cole looked at her through the haze, pain tightening his jaw. Ellis, he rasped. Stay down. Mara reached the rifle. Behind her, Lieutenant Hayes shouted from cover. Ellis, get back. She didn't. She wrapped one hand around the rifle stock, the other around the sling, and pulled it toward her with a calm that made no sense in the middle of chaos. Kellen Price, the youngest SEAL on the team, stared at her from behind a boulder 10 feet away. What are you doing? He yelled. You don't touch that rifle. Mara finally looked up. Her eyes were steady. Not angry. Not afraid. Steady. Then somebody else take the shot, she said. No one answered. The canyon answered for them. Another round struck the rock above Hayes, forcing the entire team lower. Their extraction route was gone. Their radio was damaged. Their drone feed had gone. Black 2 minutes earlier. The ridgeline was too high, the angle too narrow, and the hostile shooter had them pinned with the patience of a man who knew exactly how trapped they were. Mara turned back to Cole. Distance? She asked. Cole blinked. For a moment, he forgot the pain. Because she had not asked like a frightened soldier guessing at survival. She had asked like a shooter. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in courage and respect, hit like and subscribe. These stories inspire change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Mara. 47 minutes earlier, Mara Ellis had been standing beside a transport truck at the edge of Camp Ridgeline, checking ammunition crates, while the rest of the SEAL team prepared for movement. The morning was cold and pale. Thin fog rested over the gravel lot. Beyond the wire fence, the mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky. Mara worked without speaking. She counted magazines twice. Checked seals on the medical pouch. Tested the spare radio battery. Tightened straps. Repacked what others had tossed in carelessly. Her movements were quiet, exact, almost invisible. That was how most of the men preferred her. Invisible. She wore the same desert uniform, the same body armor, the same dust on her boots. But to them, she was attached support, not one of the operators. Useful, maybe. Necessary, sometimes. But not the kind of person anyone imagined when they heard the word sniper, or combat shooter, or last line of defense. Kellen Price leaned against the side of the truck, watching her close an ammunition case. He was broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, and still young enough to mistake volume for confidence. He had finished selection with strong scores and carried himself like the world had already confirmed every story he told about himself. Mara lifted a box of match-grade rounds and slid it into her pack. Kellen smirked. Careful with those, he said. They're for people who actually shoot. 2 men nearby laughed under their breath. Mara didn't look at them. She secured the flap on her pack. Cole Maddox, the team sniper, glanced over from where he was cleaning dust off his optic. He didn't laugh, but he didn't correct Kellen either. That was how it usually went. Small disrespect. Small silence. Enough to sting. Not enough for anyone to call it a problem. Kellen stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it sound personal. Just keep the ammo dry, Ellis. That's your mission. Mara picked up the final radio battery and turned it once in her hand, inspecting the casing for cracks. Then she looked toward the mountains. A thin line of dust moved across the far slope, lifted by a wind no one else seemed to notice. Wind's shifting east, she said quietly. Kellen followed her gaze, then chuckled. Great. Weather report from supply. This time the laughter came a little louder. Mara zipped the pouch closed. Her face did not change. Lieutenant Hayes walked past the truck, checking his watch. Mount up. We move in 2. The team began loading in. Boots hit metal. Rifles clicked into slings. Engines turned over with low, rough growls. Mara climbed into the last vehicle and sat near the rear, her pack between her knees, her hands resting calmly over the straps. Around her, the men talked in short bursts, reviewing the route, the target, the terrain. No one asked what she saw on the slope. No one asked why she had checked the sniper rounds herself. No one noticed the way her eyes moved across the map when Hayes unfolded it. But Mara noticed everything. The narrow canyon. The high western ridge. The abandoned stone shepherd hut marked near the pass. The wind line. The blind corner before the extraction point. She said nothing. Because years earlier, someone had taught her that the most dangerous people in a battlefield were not always the ones everyone watched. Sometimes they were the ones carrying the extra weight. Sometimes they walked at the back. Sometimes they listened while others laughed. And sometimes, when the rifle fell into the dust and no one else could take the shot, they became the only reason anyone made it home. The convoy left Camp Ridgeline just as the fog began to lift. 3 armored vehicles rolled through the outer gate in a staggered line, their tires grinding over gravel. Before dropping onto the narrow mountain road beyond the wire, the base disappeared behind them in pieces. First the watchtowers, then the fuel tanks, then the last strip of floodlights fading in the pale morning. Mara sat in the rear vehicle, knees braced against the floor, one hand holding the overhead strap as the road turned rough beneath them. The pack at her feet was heavier than it looked. Extra magazines, medical supplies, radio batteries, water, 2 smoke markers, a compact repair kit, and 3 sealed boxes of precision rounds for Cole Maddox's rifle. Every ounce had a purpose. Every item had a place. Mara had packed it herself because she trusted weight more than words. Weight told the truth. A careless soldier overloaded one side and paid for it on a climb. A tired soldier forgot a battery and lost command when the radio died. A proud soldier laughed at the person carrying supplies until the moment his life depended on something inside that pack. Across from her, Kellen Price checked his rifle for the 3rd time. He wanted people to notice. The snap of the magazine. The roll of his shoulders. The way he looked out through the open rear hatch like he was already in a movie about himself. Mara watched without staring. She had seen men like Kellen before. Not evil. Not useless. Just loud. Young enough to believe confidence and competence were the same thing. Beside him, Cole Maddox sat quiet, his sniper rifle laid across his lap in a padded sleeve. He was older than Kellen by almost 10 years, with tired eyes and the stillness of a man who had spent too many hours waiting for one clean shot. He caught Mara looking at the rifle case. "You worried about my ammo, Ellis?" Cole asked. His voice wasn't cruel, but the question still carried a thin edge of amusement. Mara looked at him. "I checked the lot numbers. 2 boxes were older than the rest." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You read lot numbers?" "I read labels." Kellen laughed. "There she is. Supply shadow doing supply things." Mara turned back toward the open hatch. No answer. The mountains opened around them, cold and gray, the slopes cut with dry ravines and scattered thorn brush. The road was barely wide. Enough for the convoy, twisting along a shelf of rock that dropped steeply into a riverbed below. Lieutenant Hayes' voice came through the headset mounted inside the vehicle. "Keep spacing. Eyes high. We're 10 minutes from the Shepherd Pass." The men shifted slightly. Not much. Enough. Hands settled closer to weapons. Conversation thinned. The lazy confidence from the base faded into something more professional. Mara felt it too. The change in air. The silence between engine rumbles. The way birds lifted from the western slope and vanished all at once. She leaned forward, looking past Kellen through the rear opening. Dust moved along the ridge above them in a narrow pulse. Not wind. Too brief. Too low. Her eyes followed the line until it disappeared behind a broken wall of stone near the old shepherd hut marked on Hayes' map. Mara reached for the vehicle intercom. Kellen's hand moved faster, pressing lightly against her wrist. "What are you doing?" Mara looked down at his hand. Then back at him. "Reporting movement." Kellen glanced out, saw nothing, and smiled like a teacher correcting a child. "That's not movement. That's mountain air." Mara did not pull her wrist away. She waited. Kellen removed his hand first. "Relax, Ellis. Let the shooters worry about shooter things." Cole looked out the rear hatch now, slower and more careful than Kellen had. For a second, his expression hardened. Then the vehicle hit a rut, jolting everyone against their seats. The dust line was gone. Cole tapped his headset. "Hayes, Maddox. Possible disturbance High West Ridge, near the hut." "No confirmation." Hayes answered after a beat. "Copy. Keep eyes on it." Kellen's smile faded. Mara said nothing. The convoy kept moving. 5 minutes later, they stopped beneath a dry overhang where the road narrowed into a canyon. The team dismounted in practiced order. Boots hit dirt. Doors thudded shut. Rifles came up. Engines idled low behind them, sounding too loud against the stone. The canyon ahead was beautiful in the way dangerous places often were. Tall walls of limestone rose on both sides, striped by centuries of weather. The morning sun had not yet reached the bottom, leaving the road in cold shadow while the upper ridges glowed gold. Every sound carried strangely. A cough. A clipped order. The scrape of a sling buckle. Each one traveled up the rock and came back changed. Mara stepped down last. The pack pulled against her shoulders. Kellen noticed. "Need help with that, ammo girl?" She tightened the strap across her chest. "No, didn't think so. You like proving points." Mara looked at him for the first time in several minutes. "No, I like finishing missions." Something in her voice made the two nearest SEALs glance over. Not because it was loud. Because it wasn't. Hayes walked back from the front of the formation, map folded in one hand. "Listen up. We move through the pass, link with the asset at the dry well, extract before noon. Minimal contact expected, but this valley has a bad memory. Stay sharp." Cole unzipped his rifle case and drew the weapon out with smooth care. The long barrel caught a brief strip of sunlight. He checked the optic, then looked toward the ridge. "Mara," he said. The use of her first name made Kellen turn. Cole held out one hand. "Precision rounds." Mara opened the side of her pack and removed the sealed box before he finished the request. Cole took it, then paused. The box was already positioned top left, easiest to reach. Exactly where a sniper would want it if things went wrong. His eyes lifted to hers. "You always pack like this?" "Yes." "Why?" Mara closed the flap. "Because people ask for things when they're out of time." Cole studied her for one more second. Then he loaded the magazine and turned away. Kellen stepped closer as the formation began moving. "You trying to impress him now?" Mara walked forward, eyes scanning the canyon walls. "No, could have fooled me." She did not answer. The team entered the pass. At first, there was only the sound of movement. Boots over dirt. Fabric brushing against armor. The faint clink of metal from someone's sling. The vehicles stayed behind, engines now distant, blocked by the turn in the canyon. Mara counted steps without meaning to. 30 to the first bend. 70 to the broken water trough. 110 to the stretch where the western ridge had a clear view into the valley floor. She had never been here before. But terrain told stories. The loose stones near the wall said animals used the narrow shade. The broken branches near the low brush said someone had passed through recently. The silence above the ridge said more than birds ever could. Hayes raised a fist. The team stopped. Mara stopped with them. Cole moved to a knee beside a boulder, raising his optic toward the high west slope. Kellen covered the forward road. The other seals spread out in quiet arcs, each man holding his sector. For a moment, the valley seemed empty. Too empty. Mara slowly lowered her pack to the ground and reached into the side pouch. Kellen saw the movement. What now? She pulled out a spare radio battery and held it in her palm. Main comms are going to struggle in this rock. Kellen shook his head. You really can't help yourself. Hayes glanced back. Price. Enough. The words landed hard. Kellen looked away, jaw tight. Mara slid the battery into an outer pocket where it could be reached quickly. Cole was still looking through his optic. Nothing on the hut, he said. No glass. No movement. Mara looked at the ridge just above the hut, not at the hut itself. A small patch of sunlight blinked once against the stone. Not a mirror. Not glass. Metal edge. Then it disappeared. Mara's voice stayed calm. Above it. Cole shifted. What? Not the hut. 3 meters above. Left of the split rock. Cole adjusted his rifle. For the first time that morning, no one laughed. The canyon held its breath. Cole found the spot. His expression changed. Hayes, he said quietly. Possible hide. High West Ridge. Hayes lifted his hand, signaling the team down. Too late. The first shot cracked across the valley. Stone exploded inches from Hayes' face. The second shot cut through the radio antenna on Corporal Reed's pack, snapping it clean in half. The team dropped hard behind cover as the canyon erupted. Kellen hit the dirt beside Mara, eyes wide now, all the swagger stripped from his face in a single second. Mara did not look at him. She was already reaching for the ammunition pack. Already listening. Already counting the time between the rifle. Crack and the echo from the ridge. Because the valley was speaking now. And she understood its language. The first seconds of the ambush did not feel like seconds. They stretched. They broke apart. They became fragments of dust, shouted orders, stone chips, and the sharp metallic taste of fear. Lieutenant Hayes dropped behind a boulder as another round struck the canyon wall above him. The impact threw pale dust over his helmet and shoulders. He wiped it from his eyes with one gloved hand and keyed his radio with the other. Ridgeline actual. This is Bravo 2. Contact. High West Ridge. We are pinned in the Shepherd Pass. Static answered. He tried again. Ridgeline actual, do you copy? Only broken noise came back. Corporal Reed slid behind cover with the damaged radio pack, still strapped to his back. The antenna hung in 2 pieces, one end dragging against the dirt like a snapped bone. Comms are hit, Reed shouted. No kidding, Kellen snapped, firing blindly toward the ridge. Cease that. Hayes barked. You don't have a target. Kellen stopped, breathing hard. The canyon punished panic. Every careless sound returned twice as loud. Every muzzle flash announced itself to the high ground. Whoever was shooting from above knew that. He was not wasting rounds. He fired once, waited, adjusted, fired again. Cold work. Patient work. Mara lay flat behind a shelf of broken limestone, one arm looped through the strap of her ammunition pack. Dust crawled over her sleeves. Her cheek was pressed close to the ground, but her eyes were lifted toward the ridge. She was not looking where the team was shooting. She was looking where the sound arrived late. The first shot had come from above the hut. The second had been higher. The third had struck at a downward angle too steep for the first position. 2 shooters. Maybe 3. Or 1 shooter changing hides with dangerous discipline. Cole Maddox moved before anyone ordered him. He crawled toward a jagged rock formation on the left side of the canyon, dragging his rifle case behind him. His body stayed low, elbows and knees moving with controlled speed. No wasted motion. No panic. That was why he was the sniper. Not because he carried the rifle. Because under fire, his mind stayed quiet. Mara watched him reach the rock and roll into a firing position. He opened the rifle case, pulled the weapon free, and seated the magazine with a firm click. Kellen shifted beside her. Can you see him? Mara didn't answer. Cole settled behind the scope. The valley seemed to narrow around him. Hayes held one hand up, signaling the others to stay down. The team froze behind cover, trusting Cole to find what they could not. Cole breathed once. Twice. His barrel moved a fraction to the left. Mara followed the line of it. Too low. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her pack. Cole adjusted again. Still too low. The enemy fired. The round struck the rock in front of Cole and skipped upward, throwing dust across his optic. Cole flinched, but stayed on the rifle. Shooter has eyes on me, he said, voice flat. Hayes shouted back, can you return? Working. Mara lifted her head just enough to see past the broken limestone. A flicker of movement touched the ridge, then vanished behind stone. Not a body. Not a face. A shadow moving against the wrong shadow. Split rock, she said. No one heard her over the next impact. A second enemy round smashed into the wall behind them, raining grit over Reed's shoulders. Reed cursed and ducked lower. Hayes pointed to two men on the right. Smoke. Give Maddox concealment. A smoke canister rolled into the open and burst, spilling gray across the canyon floor. The cloud began to spread, thick and low, but the wind inside the pass betrayed them. It pulled the smoke east, away from Cole, leaving his position half exposed. Mara saw it happen and felt something old wake inside her. Not fear. Calculation. The wind at ground level was shifting east. The wind above the ridge had been moving west before the shot. Cross current. Canyon funnel. Unstable air between shooter and target. A hard shot. But not impossible. Cole fired. The shot cracked through the canyon. A moment later, stone burst beneath the ridge line. Mississippi close, but low. Cole worked the bolt and settled again. Correction, he muttered to himself. Mara whispered before she could stop herself. Up point. 3. Hold left. Kellen turned his head. What? Mara stayed focused on the ridge. Winds cutting opposite above the shelf. Kellen stared at her like she had spoken another language. Cole did not turn, but his shoulders changed. He had heard. His barrel lifted slightly. He fired again. This time the shot struck closer to the hide. A burst of dust jumped beside the split rock, and for half a heartbeat, something dark moved behind it. Hayes saw it. Good hit. No, Cole said. He moved. The enemy answered. The round came so fast that no one had time to warn him. It struck Cole high in the shoulder and spun him sideways off the rifle. Maddox. Hayes shouted. Cole hit the ground behind the rock, teeth clenched, one hand locking over the wound. His rifle slid forward, landing in the dust just beyond his reach. The canyon went loud again. Not with gunfire. With men shouting. Medic. Cover. Where's the shooter? Reed, get pressure on him. Kellen started to move toward Cole, but another round punched into the dirt between them. He threw himself back behind cover, chest heaving. Cole tried to reach the rifle. His hand stretched across the dust. Too far. His fingers closed on nothing. Mara moved. She did not ask. She did not wait for permission. She grabbed the ammunition pack with one hand and crawled toward Cole's position, keeping her body flat as rounds struck the stone above her. Kellen reached out and caught the back of her vest. Ellis, don't. She twisted free. Not violently. Efficiently. Like she had been grabbed before and had learned exactly how little movement was needed to break contact. Kellen's hand came away empty. Mara crossed the open space in 3 low movements and slid behind the rock beside Cole. He was breathing hard, eyes squeezed shut, blood darkening the fabric near his shoulder. Reed crawled in from the opposite side and pressed gauze into the wound. Cole forced his eyes open when he saw Mara reaching for the rifle. No, he said through his teeth. Too exposed. Mara pulled the rifle into cover. Can you shoot? Cole tried to lift his arm. Pain shut it down. His face answered before his mouth did. Mara checked the weapon with a practiced glance. Dust on the scope housing. Bolt forward. Magazine seated. No visible damage. She wiped the optic edge with the heel of her glove. Kellen crawled in behind another rock 10 feet away, disbelief cutting through the fear on his face. Ellis, back off the rifle. Mara ignored him. Hayes turned sharply. What's happening? She's grabbing Maddox's rifle, Kellen shouted. Hayes looked toward her, anger and urgency colliding in his expression. Ellis, step away from that weapon. Another shot hit the ridge of stone above Hayes, forcing him down. Mara looked at the lieutenant. Her voice carried through the dust, low but clear. Then send someone who has the angle. Silence hit harder than the gunfire. Hayes looked across the canyon. Every man was pinned. Every route was covered. Every second they waited, the shooter above them corrected his fire. Cole stared at Mara's hands on the rifle. Not at her face. At her hands. The way her left hand supported the stock. The way her thumb stayed clear. The way she checked the scope without fumbling. The way she turned the rifle slightly to keep dust out of the action. His breathing changed. Ellis, Cole said quietly. Where did you learn that? Mara slid one of the precision rounds from the open pouch and checked the magazine. Not now. Cole swallowed through the pain. That wasn't a no. Mara settled lower behind the rifle, then looked past the scope to the ridge with her naked eye first. Always naked eye first. The scope made the world smaller. The eye told the truth before glass refined it. A high shelf. Broken limestone. Sunlight from the east. Dust still hanging where Cole's second shot had landed. A narrow black seam behind the split rock. There. Not the shooter. The space he needed to use. She pulled the rifle tight into her shoulder. Kellen's voice rose again, but there was less certainty in it now. You carry ammo. Mara placed her cheek against the stock. And right now, she said, I'm carrying the shot. Cole looked at Hayes. Something passed between the wounded sniper and the team leader. Not approval. Necessity. Hayes clenched his jaw. Ellis. Mara's finger rested outside the trigger guard. Waiting. Hayes said, you get one chance. Mara looked through the scope. The canyon fell away. The shouting dropped beneath her breathing. The dust became numbers. The wind became pressure. The ridge became distance, angle, shadow, patience. For the first time since the ambush began, Mara Ellis stopped being the woman at the back of the line. She stopped being the quiet one with the heavy pack. She stopped being the joke no one had been brave enough to correct. Through the glass, a shape shifted behind the split rock. Mara exhaled halfway. Held. And the valley waited. Mara did not rush the shot. That was the first thing Cole noticed. Most people hurried when fear closed around them. They jerked the rifle into place, chased the target through the scope, and tried to force the moment to obey them. Mara did none of that. She settled behind the rifle as if the canyon had gone quiet just for her. Her left elbow pressed into the dirt. Her right shoulder absorbed the stock. Her cheek rested against the comb with the same calm familiarity Cole had seen in senior snipers, men who had spent half their lives learning how to disappear behind glass and breath. But Mara Ellis was not supposed to move like that. She was not supposed to know how to build a stable position from broken ground. She was not supposed to adjust for uphill angle without asking. She was not supposed to understand that the wind inside the canyon and the wind above the ridge were fighting each other. She was supposed to carry ammunition. That was the lie everyone had accepted because it was easy. Through the scope, the ridge sharpened. The split rock filled the edge of her view. Behind it, a narrow seam of darkness broke the sunlit stone. No full body. No clear silhouette. Just the suggestion of a shoulder, then nothing. The enemy shooter was disciplined. He had fired, shifted, hidden, and waited. He knew the team below was desperate. He knew the wounded sniper was down. He knew panic would eventually force someone into the open. Mara gave him none of that. She let the crosshair rest near the stone, not on the movement. A good sniper did not shoot where fear pointed. A good sniper shot where truth would arrive. Cole watched her breathing. In. Out. Halfway in. Hold. Her finger moved. The rifle fired. The sound cracked through the canyon, deep and final, rolling off the limestone walls like thunder trapped underground. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then high above the shepherd hut, a small burst of dust jumped from the ridge. Not near the hide. Inside it. The hostile fire stopped. No one spoke. The silence after the shot felt impossible. Kellen Price stared up at the ridge, mouth slightly open, waiting for the enemy to fire again. He waited for 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing came. Lieutenant Hayes slowly lifted his head from behind cover. Report, he called. Cole's eyes stayed on Mara. Hit, he said. Hayes looked at him. You confirmed. Cole swallowed, still pressing one hand against his wounded shoulder. Confirmed enough. Mara stayed behind the scope. Not over. The words were calm. Too calm. Then the second shooter fired. The round struck the dirt near Reed's boot, throwing dust across his legs. Reed dragged Cole lower behind the rock and cursed under his breath. Kellen flinched so hard his helmet knocked against stone. There's another one? Mara had already shifted. Her rifle moved 3 degrees right, then stopped. Her eye never left the scope. Different weapon, she said. Hayes stared at her. What? Different report. Shorter barrel. Lower position. Cole's face tightened, but not from pain this time. Recognition moved through him slowly. A soldier could fake confidence. A soldier could memorize words. But that kind of correction under pressure after one shot, with the canyon still echoing around them, that was not guesswork. That was training. Hayes crawled closer to the rock line, keeping low. Ellis, can you locate him? Mara did not answer immediately. She scanned the ridge, but her rifle did not chase the sound. Her eyes moved first. Then the barrel. Small increments. Patient. Controlled. The second shooter was smarter than the first. He had chosen a lower shelf beneath the main ridge, using a crack in the limestone as a firing slit. The angle was ugly. The sun was behind him. If he stayed still, the stones swallowed his shape. Mara looked away from the scope. Kellen saw it and thought she had lost him. What are you doing? He shouted. Keep looking. Mara ignored him. She looked at the canyon wall behind them instead. The last enemy round had struck low and left. The dust mark showed entry angle. The echo had returned fast. Too fast for the high ridge. Lower shelf. Closer than expected. She went back to the scope. For 160 meters, she said. Cole blinked. Lower shelf. Yes. He gave a faint, humorless laugh through the pain. I didn't see that. Mara adjusted the elevation turret with 2 clicks. Kellen heard the sound. It was small. But in the silence between shots, it landed like a confession. You've done this before, he said. Mara kept her eye to the glass. Stay down. The second shooter fired again. This time his round struck the rock beside Mara's position, spraying her sleeve with fragments. One shard sliced across the outer fabric near her forearm. She did not move except to blink once. Hayes shouted, Ellis, fall back. No, it was not defiance. It was math. If she moved, the shooter would shift. If he shifted, they would lose the only clear angle. If they lost the angle, Cole might bleed out before extraction. Reed might get hit trying to drag him. Hayes might send 2 men into open ground and lose them both. Mara saw the chain before it happened. So she stayed. Her breathing slowed again. The world tightened. The ridge. The crack. The shadow. The thin flash of a muzzle appearing for less than a second. There. She did not wait for a better target. Better targets were for training ranges. On battlefields, you took the truth when it showed its face. Mara fired. The second shot struck the lower shelf with brutal accuracy. Dust blew inward through the crack, then spilled out like smoke. The weapon inside the slit fell silent. This time, the team heard the difference. The canyon changed. The invisible pressure that had held them down began to loosen. Hayes raised 2 fingers, signaling hold position. His eyes moved from the ridge to Mara, then to Cole. Cole looked pale now, sweat standing on his forehead. Reed kept pressure on the wound, whispering for him to stay awake. But Cole was still watching Mara. Who trained you? He asked. Mara did not look at him. Later. That's twice you've said that. Then you're counting. Cole's mouth twitched despite the pain. Kellen crawled closer, slower this time. There was dust on his face and fear in his eyes that he was trying to hide. The fear did not bother Mara. Fear was honest. It was the arrogance from before that had made men dangerous. He looked from her to the rifle. I thought you were support. Mara opened the bolt, checked the chamber, and scanned the ridge again. I am. Kellen shook his head. No. I mean, I know what you meant. That ended it. Not sharply. Not cruelly. Just completely. Hayes keyed his backup radio. the one Mara had placed within reach before the ambush. Ridgeline actual, Bravo 2. We have 2 hostile shooters down, 1 friendly wounded. Need extraction and overwatch at Shepherd Pass. This time the radio answered, broken but alive. Bravo 2, Ridgeline actual copies. Extraction inbound. Hold position. Air support 8 minutes out. Hayes looked down at the radio in his hand. Then at Mara's pack. Then at Mara. A slow understanding crossed his face. You staged the spare battery. Mara kept watching the ridge. Rock walls interfere with signal. Antenna was exposed. Backup needed to stay accessible. Reed muttered, she called that too. No one laughed. The words settled among them, heavier than the ammunition she had carried all morning. Kellen lowered his gaze. For the first time since Mara had met him, he had nothing to say. But the valley was not finished. Far above them, beyond the first ridge, a faint signal mirror flashed once. Then again. Mara saw it in the corner of her scope. Not from the lower shelf. Not from the split rock. Higher. Farther. Watching. Her jaw tightened. Cole saw the change in her face. What is it? Mara shifted the rifle toward the far ridge. Spotter. Hayes went still. Can you take him? Mara studied the distance. The far ridge was beyond the easy range of the weapon in her hands. Heat shimmer had started to rise from the stone. The wind between the canyon and the upper slope was broken into layers, each one moving differently. Even Cole would have wanted time, a clean position, and a second shooter feeding corrections. Mara had none of that. She had dust in her mouth, a wounded sniper beside her, a team pinned in the open, and an enemy spotter preparing to walk rounds onto their position. Kellen whispered, almost to himself. That's impossible. Mara heard him. She did not turn. She adjusted the scope. Impossible is usually just a word people use before they learn the math. Cole's eyes narrowed. Not at the ridge. At her. Because he had heard that sentence before. Years ago. From a man whose name most snipers spoke quietly, if they spoke it at all. Cole's voice dropped. Who taught you that? For the first time, Mara paused. Only for a second. But it was enough. The mask slipped. Not fear. Memory. Then she chambered the next round. Someone who told me never to miss when people were counting on me. The signal flash appeared again. Mara exhaled. The canyon held its breath with her. The far ridge was almost a mile away. Not a clean mile. Not the kind measured on a range with flat ground, numbered markers, and a calm instructor standing behind the shooter with a stopwatch. This was a broken mile. A battlefield mile. It cut across a canyon filled with shifting wind, heat lifting off stone, smoke fading in uneven sheets, and echoes that made every sound lie before it reached the ear. Mara studied it through the scope. The spotter was not foolish enough to show himself fully. He used the upper ridge the way a shadow used a wall, appearing only in fragments. A flash. A corner of equipment. A thin movement behind rock. He was not shooting. That made him more dangerous. Shooters gave themselves away. Spotters waited, measured, corrected, and turned chaos into precision. If he lived long enough to guide another team onto the canyon floor, Bravo 2 would not survive the extraction. Lieutenant Hayes seemed to understand that at the same time Mara did. His jaw tightened. Ellis, he said, tell me what you need. Kellen Price looked at him like he had misheard. A few minutes earlier, Hayes had ordered Mara away from the rifle. Now he was asking her for requirements. The shift landed hard across the team. Not as praise. As necessity. Mara kept her eye on the scope. Quiet. Hayes looked over his shoulder. Everyone shut up. The canyon obeyed as much as a battlefield could. Cole Maddox lay beside Mara, pale under the dust. Reed kept pressure on his wound, his gloved hands dark with blood. Cole's breathing came shallow but steady. He should have been focused on pain, blood loss, extraction, anything but the woman behind his rifle. But he could not look away. Because the way Mara adjusted to the far ridge was wrong for someone who had merely received basic marksmanship instruction. She did not chase the target. She built the shot backward. Wind first. Then angle. Then distance. Then light. Then the rhythm of the man hiding behind stone. Cole had seen that method only once before, years ago, during an advanced sniper exchange no one officially admitted had taken place. An old instructor had stood behind a line of elite shooters and told them, in a voice like gravel, that amateurs searched for bodies while professionals searched for consequences. Cole remembered laughing then. No one laughed after the man put 3 rounds through 3 steel plates they could barely see. Now Mara's hands carried that same quiet lesson. Cole swallowed. "Ellis," he said softly, "did a man named Abel Cross ever train you?" Mara did not move. But the silence changed. Kellen noticed. Hayes noticed. Even Reed looked up from Cole's wound. The name hung in the canyon like something classified had just been spoken aloud. Abel Cross. To most soldiers, it meant nothing. To snipers, it meant legend. A ghost instructor. A record holder. A man rumored to have trained shooters for units that did not appear in public budgets. Some said he had retired after a mission went wrong. Others said he had never existed at all, just a name attached to impossible shots so men could sleep at night believing someone had made them. Mara's cheek stayed against the rifle. "Later," she said. Cole's eyes narrowed. "That means yes. It means later." The spotter flashed again. A sliver of light, high and brief. Mara adjusted left. Not much. Enough that Cole saw it and drew a slow breath. Through clenched teeth. "You're not aiming at the flash." "No, you're aiming where he goes after the flash." Mara's finger rested along the trigger guard. "He's careful. Not disciplined." Cole gave a faint, pained smile. "There's a difference?" "Yes." The spotter vanished again. Mara waited. Wind moved through the canyon in layers. At ground level, it dragged smoke east along the road. Halfway up the wall, dust drifted west. Higher still, near the far ridge, heat shimmer leaned and folded, bending the light in thin waves. Kellen crawled closer, staying low this time. He did not speak. The young man who had mocked her at the truck was gone, or maybe he had simply been cracked open by fear. His face was dirty. His lips were dry. His rifle was pressed tight to his chest, but his eyes were on Mara now with something different. Not trust yet. Trust took longer. But disbelief had begun turning into attention. Mara breathed in. Out. Halfway in. Hold. The flash appeared. Then disappeared. A darker line moved behind the rock exactly where she expected it to. Mara fired. The shot tore out across the canyon and seemed to vanish into the open air. No dust burst. No visible strike. No instant confirmation. Only distance. Only silence. Kellen stared through the haze. Did she? Cole lifted his good hand slightly. Wait. 2 seconds passed. 3. Then, on the far ridge, the signal mirror tumbled from behind the stone, catching sunlight as it fell. It bounced once, flashed bright, and disappeared down the slope. No more signal came. Hayes stared at the ridge. Spotter down. Cole closed his eyes for half a second. Spotter down. For the first time since the ambush began, Bravo 2 breathed as one. Not relief. Not yet. Relief was dangerous before extraction. But the terrible grip on the valley had loosened. Hayes moved immediately. Reed, prep Maddox for movement. Price, Alvarez, cover east wall. Daniels, smoke on my mark. Ellis, he stopped. The old version of the order would have been simple. Ellis, carry the ammo. Ellis, stay in the rear. Ellis, keep your head down. Now Hayes looked at the rifle in her hands, then at the high ridge she had just silenced. Ellis, you're overwatch until the bird gets here. Kellen's eyes flicked to her. No joke came. Mara gave one short nod. Copy. Just that. No smile. No victory. No speech. She settled back into the rifle and continued scanning. That was what finally unsettled Kellen the most. Not the shots. Not the impossible distance. Not the way Cole Maddox, the best sniper on the team, looked at her like he was seeing a classified file come alive. It was the fact that Mara did not seem surprised by herself. Everyone else was trying to catch up to what she had become in front of them. Mara was already past it. Already working. The next minutes passed in hard, careful pieces. Reed wrapped Cole's shoulder tighter and secured his arm against his body. Cole gritted his teeth but made no sound beyond a controlled breath through his nose. Blood had soaked part of his sleeve, but his eyes stayed clear. "Keep him awake," Hayes said. "I'm awake," Cole muttered. "Good. Stay that way." A low thump sounded in the distance. Then another. Helicopter rotors. Faint, but coming closer. Bravo 2 shifted into extraction posture. Smoke canisters were aligned near the road. Fields of fire were reassigned. No one moved casually now. The arrogance from the morning had been stripped down to training, and training, when respected, could still save lives. Mara watched the ridges. Her scope passed over the split rock, the lower shelf, the far ridge, then back again. The dead ground between them. The shadow below the shepherd hut. The dry wash on the east side. She saw no movement. But absence did not comfort her. Absence was sometimes the enemy holding his breath. Kellen crawled beside her, keeping 2 feet of space this time. "Mara," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She did not look away from the scope. "What?" He swallowed. "I didn't know." Mara's voice stayed even. No, he winced slightly, because he deserved that. "I mean, I didn't know you could shoot like that. Most people don't." Another pause. Dust moved between them. Then Kellen said, "I shouldn't have said what I said." Mara scanned the upper ridge. "No, you shouldn't have." He waited for more. Forgiveness, maybe. Reassurance. Something to make his regret easier to carry. Mara gave him none of that. Not because she was cruel. Because some lessons had to remain heavy long enough to change a man. The helicopters grew louder. Hayes raised one hand. 30 seconds. The first smoke went out, blooming thick and white across the extraction road. The second followed, then the third, building a wall between the team and the ridge. The wind tugged the smoke east, but slower now. The canyon was shifting again. Mara adjusted her position. Cole saw it. "What do you see?" he asked. Mara's scope stopped near the dry wash on the east side. For a moment, nothing. Then a stone rolled where no stone should have rolled. Her voice dropped. Movement. East wash. Close. Hayes turned. "How many?" Mara waited. One shape. Then another. Then the brief outline of a rifle muzzle beneath brush. 3. Maybe 4. Trying to cut off extraction. Hayes cursed under his breath. The helicopters were almost overhead now. Too close to wave off. Too exposed to land blind. "Can you slow them?" Mara had already shifted the rifle. "Yes." Kellen moved beside her, raising his own weapon toward the east wash. This time, he did not speak over her. He did not tell her what she was. He waited for her correction. Mara noticed. 2 o'clock, she said. Low brush. Don't shoot until they cross the pale rock. Kellen nodded. Copy. The first enemy fighter broke from the wash, running low toward a cluster of stones that would give him a line on the landing zone. Mara fired. The round struck the rock inches in front of him, exploding dust into his path. He fell back hard, scrambling for cover. Not a kill shot. A warning. A denial. A way to stop movement without wasting the angle. Kellen glanced at her, confused. You missed? No, the second fighter tried to move around the dust cloud. Kellen tracked him, waited until he crossed the pale rock, then fired a controlled burst. The man dropped behind cover, forced away from the extraction lane. Mara shifted again. Good, she said. One word. It hit Kellen harder than praise should have. The helicopter swept into view above the canyon, rotors hammering the air, flattening smoke and dust into violent spirals. The crew chief leaned from the open door, scanning for the wounded. Hayes shouted through the storm. Move Maddox. Move now. Reed and Alvarez lifted Cole between them. Cole clenched his jaw, boots dragging for the first steps before he found enough strength to help. Mara stayed behind the rifle. Last to move. Still watching. Kellen looked back from the smoke. For 1 second, he saw her clearly through the dust, small against the canyon wall, rifle steady, eyes cold on the ridge, protecting the same men who had doubted her that morning. And finally, Kellen understood something no training instructor had ever been able to beat into him. Strength was not always loud. Sometimes it carried the pack. Sometimes it took the insult. Sometimes it waited until the exact second everyone else ran out of answers. Then it asked for the rifle. The helicopter did not land. It fought the canyon. Rotor wash slammed into the limestone walls and came back in violent waves, turning dust into a living thing. Smoke bent sideways. Loose gravel skittered across the road. The air filled with grit so thick that the team became shadows moving through a storm. The crew chief leaned from the open door, one hand locked around the frame, the other waving Bravo 2 forward. Move. 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 Lieutenant Hayes ran half-crouched through the smoke, rifle up, eyes cutting between the ridge and the landing zone. Reed and Alvarez carried Cole Maddox between them, each man hooked under one of his arms. Cole's boots scraped the dirt, then found rhythm, then slipped again as pain tore through his shoulder. He did not cry out. He bit down on it. Mara stayed behind. The rifle was still against her shoulder. The East Wash had gone quiet after Kellen's burst, but quiet meant nothing. Quiet could be fear. Quiet could be retreat. Quiet could be a man finding a better angle. Through the scope, Mara watched the pale rock where the enemy fighter had disappeared. No movement. She shifted left. Brush. Stone. A dark gap beneath the wash. There. Not a body. A sleeve. The shape crawled toward a position that would give him a shot into the helicopter's open door. Mara fired. The round struck the rock in front of him, hard enough to shower his cover with fragments. The sleeve vanished. The rifle barrel pulled back. Denied. She worked the bolt. Kellen Price appeared beside her, breathing hard, eyes red from dust. Hayes says move. Mara kept scanning. Go. I'm not leaving you here. She looked at him then. Just once. The same young SEAL who had called her ammo girl that morning was now crouched beside her in the dirt, rifle raised toward the wash, refusing to run while she covered the team. Fear still lived in his face. But something else stood beside it now. Shame, maybe. Or respect, beginning the hard work of replacing arrogance. Mara turned back to the scope. Then cover right. Kellen dropped behind the stone beside her. Copy. No argument. No joke. No correction. Just one word, clean and immediate. The helicopter drifted lower but still could not fully settle. Its skids hovered inches above the road, rising and dropping with the unstable air. Hayes reached the aircraft first, then turned back, shouting directions through the rotor blast. Get Maddox in. Reed and Alvarez hauled Cole toward the door. The crew chief grabbed Cole's vest and helped drag him inside. Cole's wounded shoulder hit the edge of the frame, and his face went white, but still he made no sound. Once inside, he twisted enough to look back through the dust. He searched for the rifle. Then for Mara. He found both still on the ground. Ellis, he shouted, but the rotors tore the name apart. Mara heard nothing. She saw only the wash. Two shapes moved now, using the smoke as cover. One low, one higher. Both trying to flank the landing zone before the helicopter could lift. Kellen, she said. I see one. There are two. He adjusted, eyes narrowing. Where? High brush. Right of the black stone. Wait for the shoulder. Kellen held his fire. A few hours earlier, he would have fired too early. A few minutes earlier, maybe still. Now he waited because Mara told him to. The first fighter moved. Kellen fired once, then again, controlled and tight. The shape dropped behind the brush and stopped advancing. Mara shifted to the lower target. The second fighter raised his rifle. She did not have a clean shot. Too much smoke. Too many moving bodies near the aircraft. She could not risk sending a round past him toward the helicopter. So she changed the problem. Mara aimed at the stone just above his cover and fired. The impact exploded downward, forcing him to duck as fragments rained over his position. Kellen immediately followed with a burst into the dirt line ahead of him. The fighter disappeared back into the wash. Hayes shouted from the helicopter. Ellis. Price. Now. Kellen grabbed Mara's pack with one hand. I'll carry it. Mara almost refused. Habit rose first. No. Mine. I carry the weight. But then she looked at him and saw that he was not trying to take it from her. He was trying to share it. That was different. She slid the rifle strap across her shoulder and shoved the ammunition pack toward him. Don't drop it. Kellen hooked it over one arm. It's heavier than it looks. Mara stood into a crouch. It always was. They moved together. Not running upright. Not panicking. Low and fast through smoke, across gravel, under the hammering aircraft blades. Mara kept the rifle angled down but ready, her eyes still cutting toward the wash. Kellen stayed half a step behind and to her right, covering the blind side without being told. A round snapped through the smoke behind them. Kellen flinched but did not stop. Mara turned, dropped to one knee and fired toward the muzzle flash before the echo faded. The shot silenced it. Then she rose again. The crew chief grabbed Kellen first and pulled him toward the door. Kellen threw Mara's pack inside before climbing in. Hayes reached down for Mara. Move. Mara took one step toward the helicopter, then stopped. Her eyes lifted to the ridge. High west. Above the split rock. A shape had appeared where no one had been watching. Not close. Not clear. But aimed. Not at Mara. At the cockpit. The pilot could not see it. The crew chief could not see it. Hayes was turned toward her, arm extended, shouting over the storm. Mara raised Cole's rifle. Standing. No proper position. No time to kneel. No chance to breathe right. A standing shot with a sniper rifle in rotor wash, through dust at a ridge that flickered in and out of sight like a bad memory. Impossible. Kellen saw her lift the rifle and shouted something from inside the aircraft. Hayes followed her gaze and froze. The shape on the ridge steadied. Mara did not think about the morning. She did not think about Kellen laughing beside the truck. She did not think about years of being told to stay behind the shooters, behind the men, behind the line where other people decided her value. She thought of the cockpit glass, the pilot's head, the angle, the wind being beaten downward by the helicopter blades, the dust moving left, the muzzle on the ridge. The half-second before death became visible. She fired. The recoil drove into her shoulder. The sound vanished under the rotors. The rifle dipped, then rose again as her eyes searched the ridge. The shape was gone. A rifle slid down the stone face, bouncing once before disappearing into the smoke below. Hayes stared at her. Even in the dust, even through the noise, the look on his face was clear. He had just watched a shot no one on his team would have taken. Not because they lacked courage. Because they lacked the math. Mara lowered the rifle. Now we can go, she said. Hayes grabbed her vest and hauled her into the helicopter. The crew chief slammed the side of his fist against the frame. Lift. Lift. The helicopter rose hard, pulling away from the canyon floor as bullets struck the dirt beneath it. Smoke swallowed the road. The Shepherd Pass dropped below them, shrinking into a scar of pale stone and red dust. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. The noise was too loud for conversation, but silence had weight even under rotors. Cole was strapped near the bulkhead, one medic cutting open the fabric around his wound. His face was pale, his lips pressed tight, but his eyes stayed locked on Mara. Mara sat across from him, Cole's rifle across her knees. Dust covered her hair, her sleeves, the side of her face. A thin cut marked her forearm where stone fragments had sliced the fabric. She looked less like a hero than someone who had simply been too busy to notice she was bleeding. Kellen sat beside the open pack, one hand still gripping the strap. He looked down at it, at the ammunition, the batteries, the smoke markers, the neatly organized pouches he had laughed about that morning. Then he looked at Mara. I thought carrying this made you less than us, he said, voice barely audible under the rotors. Mara did not answer right away. She looked out through the open door at the canyon falling behind them. Then she said, gear doesn't make someone less. Kellen swallowed. No, I know that now. Cole shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face. Ellis. Mara looked at him. The medic tried to push Cole back, but Cole lifted his good hand just enough to stop him. That last shot, Cole said. Standing rotor wash, high ridge. Mara's expression remained unreadable. Cole breathed through the pain. There are maybe 5 people I know who would even understand how to attempt that. The helicopter banked left, sunlight cutting through the open door and across Mara's face. Hayes turned from the front of the aircraft. He had been listening. So had everyone else. Cole's eyes narrowed with certainty now. Abel cross-trained you. This time, Mara did not say later. She looked down at the rifle across her knees, at the dust still caught along the scope, at the weapon that had been handed to her only because the battlefield had run out of options. Then she said quietly, "He was my father." The name changed the air inside the helicopter. Abel Cross. For most of the crew, it was just a name spoken over engine noise and rotor thunder. A name attached to no face, no rank, no memory. But for the men who knew precision shooting, it landed like a classified door opening. Cole Maddox stared at Mara from the stretcher. The medic kept working on his shoulder, cutting away fabric, packing the wound, checking his pulse. Cole barely reacted. His eyes stayed fixed on her as if the blood loss had stripped away every unnecessary thought and left only the question that mattered. Abel Cross was your father? Mara looked out through the open side door. Below them, the canyon stretched away in broken lines of stone and smoke. The Shepherd Pass was already fading behind the curve of the mountain, but Mara could still see it in her mind with perfect clarity. The split rock, the lower shelf, the far ridge, the muzzle above the cockpit. Some places did not leave when you left them. They stayed behind the eyes. Yes, she said. No one spoke for a moment. Kellen Price sat across from her, still holding the strap of the ammunition pack. The pack rested between his boots, dusty and scarred from the canyon floor. He looked from Mara to Cole, then back again. He wanted to ask who Abel Cross was. But for once, he knew enough to stay quiet. Cole swallowed, fighting pain and disbelief at the same time. I trained under him for 3 weeks in Nevada, he said. Unofficial course. No patches. No photos. No names after graduation. Mara's eyes shifted slightly, but she did not look at him. He hated photos. Cole gave a faint laugh, then winced as the medic pressed harder into the wound. Yeah, he hated a lot of things. He hated carelessness, Mara said. That made Cole go still. There was no softness in her voice. Only memory. And under it, something heavier. Lieutenant Hayes stepped closer, one hand braced against the helicopter frame as the aircraft cut through mountain wind. Ellis, he said, why wasn't this in your file? Mara turned from the door. Dust still clung to one side of her face. Her forearm was bleeding through a shallow cut she had not yet treated. Cole's rifle lay across her knees, safe, clean enough, controlled. Even seated in the helicopter, she looked like she was still holding Overwatch. Because I wasn't supposed to be in that file. Hayes frowned. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm cleared to give. The medic glanced up. So did Reed. So did Alvarez. The helicopter noise filled the gap between them. Kellen looked down at the ammunition pack again. Earlier that morning, he had believed Mara's silence meant she had nothing to say. Now he understood silence could be a wall, and behind it might be a whole war no one had earned the right to enter. Cole's voice dropped. Cross had a daughter. I remember hearing rumors. Mara looked at him then. Not sharply, but enough to warn him where the edge was. Cole continued anyway, quieter now. They said she washed out of a selection pipeline. Kellen's eyes flickered. Hayes did not move. Mara's face changed almost imperceptibly. It was not anger. Anger was easier to show. This was older. A scar beneath the uniform. I didn't wash out, she said. The words were soft. No one mistook them for weak. Cole searched her face. Then what happened? The helicopter banked again, and sunlight swept across the inside of the aircraft. For a second, Mara looked younger than she had in the canyon. Not less capable. Just more human. The dust, the blood, the rifle, the stillness, all of it remained. But behind her eyes was another place. Another range. Another day. She looked down at the rifle. My father trained shooters who were already considered elite, she said. Men who had records. Men who had reputations. Men who walked onto ranges expecting to impress him. Cole breathed out through his nose. That sounds like him. He didn't care about reputations. He cared about what happened after the first mistake. Mara's thumb brushed dust from the rifle's stock. When I was 14, he made me sit behind a scope for 4 hours without firing a shot, just watching wind move through grass. I thought he was punishing me. He told me the rifle was the last part of shooting. The first part was learning how the world tells the truth. Kellen listened without blinking. This was not the kind of story he expected from someone he had mocked beside a truck. He had expected embarrassment. Maybe anger. Maybe a sharp comeback. He had not expected a childhood built out of patience, distance, and silence. Mara continued. He taught me to shoot after school. Before sunrise. In rain. In heat. On hillsides. Across water. Through dust. He taught me that a missed shot belonged to the shooter, not the wind, not the rifle, not the spotter. Cole nodded slowly. He said that in Nevada. He said it everywhere. A small silence followed. Not empty. Respectful. Hayes looked toward the front of the helicopter, then back at her. You said you weren't supposed to be in the file. Mara's jaw tightened. When I entered the service, people saw the name cross and expected a legend. Or they saw me and expected a mistake. There was never much room between. Kellen lowered his eyes. Mara saw it, but she did not stop. I passed the tests they let me take. I broke records they didn't publish. I failed interviews before I opened my mouth because men had already decided what Abel Cross's daughter should look like. Cole stared at the floor. No one defended the system. No one could. Then came an operation, Mara said. Her voice cooled, becoming more distant. More controlled. The kind that never happened. Hayes' expression changed. He understood that language. Every career soldier did. Mara looked through the open door again. We lost our designated shooter before extraction. The team was pinned. I took the rifle. Kellen's grip tightened on the pack strap. The story was too familiar. What happened? He asked before he could stop himself. Mara looked at him. For once, she answered. Everyone came home. The words should have sounded like victory. They didn't. Cole's eyes narrowed. But Mara's mouth tightened. But the shot was outside authorization. The report said I abandoned assigned duties. The report said I acted outside my role. The report said the outcome did not erase the breach. Reed muttered, That's insane. No, Mara said. It was convenient. The helicopter seemed quieter, though it was not. Kellen looked at her as if every joke he had made that morning had grown teeth and turned back toward him. They buried it, he said. Mara did not answer. She didn't need to. Hayes' face hardened in a way that had nothing to do with combat. What happened to your father? Mara looked down at the rifle. He fought the report. Cole closed his eyes briefly. Mara's voice remained steady. He used every contact he had. Every favor. Every piece of reputation he had spent his life earning. He told them if they punished me for saving a team, they were not protecting standards. They were protecting pride. No one interrupted. He lost. The words fell flat and heavy. Mara breathed once slow. After that, his name stopped opening doors. Then it started closing them. He retired 6 months later. Cole whispered, I didn't know. Most people didn't. The medic finished securing Cole's bandage and finally turned toward Mara. You're bleeding too. Mara glanced at her forearm like she had forgotten it belonged to her. It's nothing. That's what all difficult patients say. For the first time, something almost like a smile touched Cole's face. She's definitely Cross's daughter. The tension shifted slightly. Not gone. Just loosened enough for everyone to breathe. The helicopter crossed over the outer perimeter of Camp Ridgeline. Below, the landing zone came into view, concrete pads, fuel trucks, medical personnel already waiting in a line of wind-whipped uniforms. Hayes crouched near Mara before the helicopter descended. Ellis. She looked at him. I owe you an apology. Kellen's head lifted. Mara held Hayes' gaze without expression. For what? For not asking the right questions before today. The aircraft dropped lower, rotors pounding against the landing pad. Mara looked at the team around her. Cole strapped to the stretcher. Reed and Alvarez silent, bruised, alive. Kellen holding the pack he once mocked. Hayes waiting for an answer. You made the call you had with the information you had, she said. Hayes shook his head. No. I made the call that matched what I assumed. That landed deeper. Because it was honest. The helicopter touched down hard. Medical personnel rushed forward as the crew chief opened the door. Wind tore through the cabin. Voices shouted. Boots hit metal. Cole was lifted first. As they carried him past Mara, he reached out with his good hand and caught her wrist. Not hard. Just enough to stop her. You know what my instructor told me at the end of that Nevada course? He asked. Mara looked at him. Cole's eyes were tired, but clear. He said the best shooter he ever trained never wore his patch. Mara went still. Cole held her gaze. I thought he meant himself. For a moment, Mara said nothing. The noise of the landing zone rushed around them. Medics shouted. Engines whined. The team moved. The world continued like it had not just cracked something open inside her. Then Mara gently removed Cole's hand from her wrist. Get your shoulder fixed, she said. Cole smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. The medics carried him away. Kellen stepped down from the helicopter after Mara, the ammunition pack still over his shoulder. On the landing pad, under the hard white sun, he looked smaller than he had that morning. Not physically. Something else had been reduced. The performance. The noise. The need to stand above someone to feel tall. He walked up beside her and held out the pack. Mara reached for it. Kellen did not let go immediately. I called you ammo girl, he said. She looked at him. I know. I said you didn't belong near shooters. Yes. His throat moved. I was wrong before the first shot. Not after it. That made her pause. Kellen's eyes stayed on hers, even though shame made it difficult. I don't want to respect you only because you saved us. I should have respected you before I knew what you could do. The landing zone noise rolled around them. For the first time all day, Mara's expression softened by a fraction. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. That's a better place to start, she said. Kellen released the pack. Mara took it back onto her shoulder. The weight settled where it always had. But this time, when the team walked across the landing pad, no one called it a burden. And no one mistook the woman carrying it for anything less than the reason they were alive. By the time the team reached the medical bay, the story had already outrun them. That was how bases worked. A helicopter came in hot. A sniper went down. A support soldier stepped out carrying his rifle. Men who had left the wire with dust on their boots returned with silence in their mouths. People noticed. They always did. Medics rushed Cole Maddox through the double doors on a rolling stretcher, his face pale beneath the dried dirt, one hand still trying to wave off concern he had no strength to resist. Reed followed close behind, answering questions in clipped bursts. High ridge ambush. Multiple shooters. Shoulder wound. No, he stayed conscious. Yes, she took over. That last sentence made two corpsmen look up. She took over. Mara heard it, but kept walking. She moved to the weapons clearing station outside the bay and placed Cole's rifle on the table with both hands. Slowly. Carefully. The way a person returns something. Sacred after carrying it through fire. Dust clung to the stock. A thin line of dried blood marked the sling where Cole had dragged it after he fell. Mara checked the chamber, cleared it, removed the magazine, and set the remaining rounds beside the weapon in a neat row. Behind her, Kellen Price stood with the ammunition pack hanging from one shoulder. For once, he did not look like he was waiting for someone to notice him. He looked like he was carrying something he had finally learned how to respect. Lieutenant Hayes came out of the medical bay a minute later, pulling off his gloves. His jaw was tight, his eyes tired. He's going to surgery, Hayes said. They think he'll keep the arm. No one reacted loudly. Relief moved through them in quiet ways. Reed lowered his head. Alvarez closed his eyes for one breath. Kellen let the pack slide down from his shoulder and set it gently on the bench, like dropping it hard would be another kind of insult. Mara nodded once. Good. Hayes looked at the rifle, then at her. The commander wants us in debrief in 20. Mara reached for a cleaning cloth. I'll have the weapon ready. Mara. The use of her first name stopped her hand. Hayes glanced toward the medical bay doors, then back to her. Leave it. Someone else can clean the rifle. The old answer rose immediately. No. Finish the task. Leave nothing for others. Keep your place useful enough that no one asks why you are there. But Hayes did not say it like an order to push her aside. He said it like a man who had finally realized she had been carrying more than equipment all morning. Mara released the cloth. Yes, sir. They crossed the base in silence. The sun had climbed higher now, burning the fog off the gravel roads and turning the metal roofs white with heat. Personnel moved aside as Bravo 2 passed. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to, which was worse. Mara could feel the questions forming before anyone spoke them. Was that her? Did she really take the rifle? How far was the shot? Wasn't she just support? The words followed without being said. Kellen heard them too. At the entrance to the operations building, 2 young sailors stepped aside, whispering. That's the ammo carrier? Kellen stopped. Mara kept walking, but Hayes noticed Kellen had fallen back. The 2 sailors stiffened when Kellen turned toward them. His face was still streaked with canyon dust. His eyes were not loud anymore. Her name is Ellis, he said. And you'll stand out of the way when she walks by. The sailors went silent. Mara paused at the door. She did not turn around. But she heard him. That was enough. The debrief room was cold, too bright, and full of people who had not been in the canyon. That was the part Mara had always disliked most. Rooms like this could make a battlefield look clean. A screen on the wall. A map on the table. Timelines written in marker. Casualties reduced to initials. Decisions questioned by men whose boots were still clean. Commander Voss stood at the head of the table, arms folded across his chest. He was a hard-faced officer with silver at his temples and the kind of stare that made junior personnel stand straighter before they knew why. Beside him stood 2 intelligence officers, a communications tech, and the base operations chief. Bravo 2 entered as a unit. Mara came last. Old habit. Voss looked over the team. His eyes stopped on her for half a second longer than the others. Lieutenant Hayes, he said. Walk me through it. Hayes stepped to the map. He explained the route. The Shepherd Pass. The first contact. Reed's damaged radio. Cole's attempt to engage. The hostile shooters on the ridge. His voice stayed professional. No drama. No decoration. Then he reached the part where Cole fell. Voss looked up. And who authorized Specialist Ellis to take possession of the sniper system? The room changed. Just slightly. There it was. Not gratitude. Not wonder. Not the question of how many lives had been saved. Authorization. Mara had expected it. She stood with her hands behind her back, eyes forward, face unreadable. Hayes held Voss' gaze. I did. Kellen looked at him. So did Reed. So did Mara. It was not exactly true. Hayes had given permission after Mara already had the rifle in her hands. Everyone in the canyon knew that. Voss knew it too. His eyes narrowed. You authorized her before or after she had already moved? Hayes did not flinch. I authorized the only shooter with the angle to stop the ambush. One of the intelligence officers shifted uncomfortably. Voss looked toward Mara. Specialist Ellis. Yes, sir. You are assigned support capacity to Bravo 2. Yes, sir. You are not listed as a sniper in this unit. No, sir. You engaged multiple hostile targets with the precision rifle system during an active extraction. Yes, sir. The room held still. Voss took one slow step around the table. Why? Mara met his eyes. Because our sniper was down, the team was pinned, and the enemy had fire control over the extraction lane. That is a tactical summary. I asked why you engaged. Her voice did not change. Because I could make the shots. The answer landed without decoration. No pride. No apology. Voss studied her for a long moment. And how did you know that? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Mara could feel every man in the room waiting. There were many ways to answer. Because my father trained me. Because I have done it before. Because your file does not contain everything true about a soldier. Because men like you keep asking the wrong question after women save the right lives. She said none of those. I knew the distance, the wind, and the cost of waiting. Commander Voss stared at her. Then he looked at Hayes. Casualty count? 1 wounded. No fatalities. Enemy? 3 confirmed shooters down. 1 spotter neutralized. 2 additional fighters pushed off the extraction lane. The communications tech looked up from his notes. Aircrew reported a hostile aiming at the cockpit during liftoff. They're saying Specialist Ellis engaged from a standing position under rotor wash. Voss turned back to Mara. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. Kellen looked at the floor. He had watched that shot. He had felt the rotor wash hammering his chest, had seen the dust swallowing the ridge, had understood just enough to know that understanding it was beyond him. Voss walked to the table and picked up a folder. Mara recognized the color before she saw the label. Old Personnel Archive. Her stomach tightened once, then went still. Voss opened it. Your marksmanship records are incomplete. Mara said nothing. Your training history contains sealed references. Still nothing. Your previous operational review includes a restricted incident report. Hayes turned toward her. Cole had mentioned it. Mara had described pieces of it in the helicopter. But hearing it laid out in a command room made the past feel less like memory and more like a sentence waiting to be repeated. Voss flipped one page. According to this, you were removed from a classified selection pipeline for acting outside assigned role parameters. Kellen's jaw tightened. Reed muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Voss looked up. Is that report accurate? Mara answered carefully. The report exists. That is not what I asked. No, sir. Then answer. Mara held his gaze. It is accurate that I acted outside my assigned role. Voss waited. Mara continued. It is not accurate that doing so endangered the mission. The room went quiet. Voss closed the folder halfway. Why was the report sealed? I was not part of that decision. Who was? My father challenged it. Voss' expression shifted. Abel Cross. This time, the name did not echo through a helicopter. It settled into a room full of records, rank, and men who suddenly understood that the woman standing at the back of the formation had a history they had failed to read. The operations chief looked from the folder to Mara. Cross trained you. Mara answered without looking away from Voss. Yes, sir. Voss closed the folder. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he walked to the screen on the wall and nodded to the communications tech. Pull the aircrew footage. The tech clicked twice. The screen lit up. Grainy helicopter video filled the room. Smoke. Dust. The open canyon. Figures moving through chaos. Cole being hauled into the aircraft. Kellen climbing in with Mara's pack. Then Mara appeared on the ground. Small in frame. Nearly swallowed by rotor wash. She stopped outside the helicopter and raised the rifle. Someone in the room whispered, standing. The video shook as the aircraft lifted. The ridge was barely visible. The hostile shape appeared for less than a second. Mara fired. The shape vanished. The rifle slid down the stone. The room stayed silent after the footage ended. No one asked if she had gotten lucky. Luck did not stand like that. Luck did not read wind under rotor wash. Luck did not stop a cockpit shot with half the second left. Commander Voss turned from the screen. His expression was still hard. But something behind it had changed. Specialist Ellis, he said, you understand I have to review the full circumstances. Yes, sir. You understand there will be questions. Yes, sir. And you understand that by regulation, this is complicated. Mara's voice stayed even. Most things that save lives are simple when they happen and complicated after. Kellen looked up. Hayes almost smiled. Voss did not. But his eyes sharpened with something close to respect. That sounds like something Cross would say. It is. Voss looked around the room. Then let me make one thing clear before anyone starts building the wrong narrative. Bravo 2 is alive because Specialist Ellis acted when the situation demanded it. The review will include that fact first. Mara did not move. But the words struck deeper than she expected. Not because they erased the past. They did not. Not because they fixed the old report. They could not. But because, for once, the truth had entered the record before pride could rewrite it. Voss faced her again. Until further notice, you're attached to Bravo 2 in expanded tactical capacity. Kellen exhaled. Reed's eyebrows lifted. Hayes nodded once. Mara remained still. Yes, sir. Voss glanced at Cole's rifle, now resting in the evidence case beside the room. And Ellis. Yes, sir. When Maddox is cleared to speak, I expect him to confirm what I already suspect. Mara waited. That today was not the first time you belonged behind a rifle. The room held its silence. This time, it was not doubt. Mara looked at the screen where the final frame of the helicopter footage still glowed in frozen dust and smoke. No, sir, she said quietly. It wasn't. Cole Maddox woke up 2 hours after surgery with his left shoulder wrapped tight, his mouth dry, and the stubborn expression of a man already planning how soon he could ignore medical advice. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft pulse of machines beside his bed. For a moment, he did not remember the canyon. Then he did. The split rock. The lower shelf. The far ridge. The rifle falling into dust. Mara Ellis behind the scope. Cole turned his head slowly and found Lieutenant Hayes standing near the window, arms crossed, uniform still marked with dirt from the mission. Kellen Price sat in the chair near the wall, elbows on his knees, hands folded together like he had been there a long time and had not known what to do with them. Mara was not in the room. Cole noticed that first. "Where's Ellis?" he asked. His voice came out rough. Hayes stepped closer. "Debrief, follow-up." Cole tried to sit up. Pain stopped him halfway. Kellen stood immediately. "Don't move." Cole gave him a tired look. "Price, if you tell me what to do while I'm in a hospital bed, I will haunt your career." Kellen sat back down. "Yes, petty officer." Hayes almost smiled. Almost. Then his face grew serious again. Voss reviewed the aircrew footage. Cole's eyes sharpened. And he's opening a formal correction to her operational record. For several seconds, Cole said nothing. The words had to travel through pain, medication, and memory before they became real. "A correction," he repeated. Hayes nodded. "Not a medal yet. Not a miracle. But the old incident is being pulled back into review. Today's action goes in first." Cole stared at the ceiling. He remembered Abel Cross standing behind a row of shooters in the desert years earlier, hat low over his eyes, voice calm enough to make every man nervous. "The best shooter I ever trained never wore my patch." Cole had thought it was a riddle. Now it felt like an apology the old man had never been allowed to deliver. "She shouldn't have had to save another team to be believed," Cole said. "No," Hayes answered. "She shouldn't have." Kellen lowered his head. The silence that followed belonged mostly to him. Cole saw it. "You look terrible," he said. Kellen gave a humorless breath. "Feel worse." "Good. That means something's working." Kellen looked up. "I called her ammo girl." Cole's face hardened. "I know. I said she didn't belong near shooters." "I know that too." Kellen's jaw tightened. "I thought I was joking." "No," Cole said. "You thought you were safe." Kellen absorbed that like a hit. Hayes did not interrupt. Cole's voice stayed weak, but the edge in it was clean. "That's what people mean when they say things like that. They don't think it counts because everyone around them laughs. They think cruelty gets lighter when it travels in a group." Kellen looked toward the door. "She saved me anyway. She saved all of us." "I know." Cole studied him. "Then don't make her carry your guilt too. Do something useful with it." The door opened before Kellen could answer. Mara walked in. The room changed, but not dramatically. No music rose. No one saluted. No commander announced her name. She simply entered wearing a clean uniform with a white bandage wrapped around her forearm, her hair tied back, and the same calm expression she had carried through gunfire. She looked rested only to someone who did not know what exhaustion looked like when it had learned discipline. Kellen stood. So did Hayes. Cole tried. Mara pointed at him. "Don't." Cole stopped halfway and settled back with a grimace. "Yes, ma'am." Mara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't start." Hayes looked between them. "I'll give you 2 minutes." He started toward the door, then paused beside Kellen. "Price." Kellen looked up. "With me." Kellen hesitated, glancing once at Mara. There was something he wanted to say, but Hayes' tone made it clear that now was not the moment. He followed the lieutenant out, leaving Mara and Cole in the quiet hospital room. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Cole looked at the bandage on her arm. "You get that checked?" "Yes." "Liar." Medic looked at it. "And?" "Said I was difficult." Cole smiled faintly. Family trait. Mara crossed her arms. Careful. Cole's smile faded into something more serious. They're reopening the old report. I heard. You don't seem happy. Mara looked toward the window. Outside, the base moved on. Trucks rolled past. Personnel crossed the yard. Somewhere, a training whistle blew, sharp and ordinary, like the day had not nearly taken several lives in. A canyon. I stopped waiting for records to tell the truth a long time ago, she said. Cole watched her. That doesn't mean it shouldn't matter when they finally do. Mara did not answer. Cole shifted carefully, then reached for the small table beside the bed. Resting there was a worn sniper patch, faded at the edges, the stitching rubbed down from years on his kit. He held it out. Mara looked at it, then at him. No, Cole lifted an eyebrow. You don't even know what I'm doing. Yes, I do. Then make this easier and take it. It's yours. Cole glanced at his shoulder. For now, it's decorative. Mara did not reach for it. Cole's voice softened. My first instructor gave me this after my qualification course. Not because I was the best. I wasn't. Because I learned the one lesson he said mattered. Mara stayed still. Cole continued. He said the rifle doesn't belong to the person with the title. It belongs to the person who can protect the team when the moment comes. The words found the space between them and stayed there. Mara looked down at the patch. Abel Cross had said something like that once. Not exactly. He never repeated himself exactly. But the shape of the lesson was the same. The rifle was never about pride. It was about responsibility. Cole held the patch out farther. You protected the team. Mara's hand moved slowly. She took it. Not like a trophy. Like weight. Like memory. Like something that would have to be earned again every day she wore it. Cole released it. Thank you, he said. Mara looked at him. For the patch. For being there when I fell. Her face remained composed, but something behind her eyes shifted. You would have done the same. Cole shook his head. No. I would have tried. You did it. Outside the room, footsteps approached. The door opened again, and Hayes stepped in with Commander Voss behind him. Kellen followed last, face tense but steady. Mara immediately straightened. Voss noticed the patch in her hand, but said nothing about it. Specialist Ellis, he said. Yes, sir. Walk with us. They moved from the medical wing to the main training yard, where Bravo 2 had been ordered to gather. Word had spread even further now. Not officially. Nothing on a base spread officially at first. But people stood near doorways a little longer than necessary. Conversations quieted as Mara passed. This time, she did not walk at the back. Not because she pushed forward. Because Hayes slowed until she was beside him. When they reached the yard, the remaining members of Bravo 2 stood in formation. Reed's sleeve was still dusty. Alvarez had a bandage across his temple. Daniels held his helmet under one arm. All of them looked tired. All of them were alive. Commander Voss stepped in front of them. This is not a ceremony, he said. His voice carried across the yard. This is a correction. No one moved. Voss turned slightly toward Mara. Earlier today, Bravo 2 was ambushed in Shepherd Pass. Petty Officer Maddox was wounded. Communications were damaged. Extraction was compromised. In that moment, Specialist Mara Ellis acted beyond her assigned role and assumed precision overwatch. The phrase moved through the yard. Not took a rifle. Not disobeyed. Assumed precision overwatch. Mara heard the difference. So did everyone else. Voss continued. Her actions neutralized hostile fire, protected the extraction aircraft, and prevented further casualties. Kellen stood in formation, eyes forward, throat tight. Voss looked down the line. Let the record begin there. The words were simple. They struck Mara harder than praise would have. Then Voss turned to Kellen. Price. Kellen stepped forward. Yes, sir. You requested to speak. Mara's eyes shifted to him. Kellen faced her, then faced the team, then finally looked back at her. His hands stayed at his sides. No performance. No swagger. No attempt to make himself look better in the apology. I disrespected Specialist Ellis before the mission, he said. I called her by a name that reduced her to the gear she carried. I questioned her place on the team. I mistook silence for weakness and support duty for lesser duty. The yard was quiet. Kellen's voice did not shake, but it cost him something to keep it steady. I was wrong before I knew what she could do. I was wrong before she saved us. And I was wrong in a way that could have damaged trust before the first shot was fired. Mara watched him. This time, he did not ask her to rescue him from the weight of his own words. He carried them. I apologize to Specialist Ellis, Kellen said. And to Bravo too. It won't happen again. No one clapped. That would have been too easy. The silence held him accountable. Mara looked at him for a long second. Then she nodded once. Kellen stepped back into formation. Voss turned to Hayes. Lieutenant. Hayes stepped forward with a small sealed envelope. Specialist Ellis, he said. Mara faced him. Pending formal review and command approval, you're attached to Bravo 2 as acting precision marksman and tactical support specialist. A few eyes widened. Hayes held out the envelope. Your temporary orders. Mara took them. Her fingers closed over the paper. For years, her skill had been treated like a problem when it appeared outside the box someone had drawn for her. Now, for the first time in a long time, the box had moved. Not far enough, but enough to begin. Hayes lowered his voice so only she could hear. I should have asked who you were before the canyon forced you to show us. Mara looked at him. You know now. Yes, he said. We do. From the medical wing behind them, Cole Maddox appeared in a wheelchair pushed by a very annoyed nurse. His shoulder was immobilized. His face was pale. His expression said he had absolutely not been cleared to be there. The nurse muttered something about impossible patience. Cole ignored her. Voss turned. Maddox, you're supposed to be in bed. Cole lifted his good hand. I heard there was a correction. The team's tension broke just slightly. Even Mara almost smiled. Cole rolled closer and stopped in front of her. With effort, he raised his good hand to his brow. Then he saluted. Not because of rank. Because of debt. Because of recognition. Because in the canyon, when titles had failed and assumptions had fallen apart, Mara had carried the shot that brought them home. One by one, the rest of Bravo 2 followed. Hayes first. Then Reed. Alvarez. Daniels. Finally Kellen. His salute was the slowest. And the most honest. Mara stood in front of them with the envelope in one hand and Cole's faded patch in the other. For a moment, she was 14 again on a hillside with Abel Cross behind her, hearing him say that respect could not be demanded at the end of a barrel, and it could not be begged from people too proud to see. It had to be earned. But he had also told her something else. Never confuse earning respect with earning the right to exist. You already have that. The memory passed through her like wind over stone. Mara returned the salute. Sharp. Controlled. Complete. Later, when the sun dropped behind the mountains and the base settled into evening, Kellen found her at the weapons bench outside the armory. She was cleaning Cole's rifle. Of course she was. The barrel was laid out. The bolt assembly rested on a cloth. Each component had been placed in exact order, free of dust, free of blood, free of the canyon. Kellen stopped several feet away. Need anything? Mara did not look up. You know how to clean a precision rifle? Not like you. Then watch. He stepped closer. Not too close. And watched. For several minutes, neither spoke. Mara worked with the calm patience of someone who understood that care after the mission mattered as much as courage during it. Finally, Kellen said, Why did you let me cover right? Mara slid a cloth along the bolt. Because you listened. He nodded slowly. That's all. That's a lot. He looked toward the mountains, now dark against the violet sky. I'll do better. Mara set the bolt down and finally looked at him. Do better when no one impressive is watching. Kellen absorbed it. Yes, ma'am. She returned to the rifle. The night air cooled around them. Somewhere across the base, a flag rope tapped softly against a metal pole. In the distance, Maddox wheeled Cole back inside after losing the argument with his nurse. Mara cleaned the rifle until every trace of dust was gone. Then she placed Cole's patch beside her new orders. For years, people had looked at her and seen the wrong thing. Too quiet. Too small. Too ordinary. Support. Ammo carrier. A woman standing near the shooters, but never imagined as one of them. The canyon had not made her dangerous. It had only revealed what discipline, patience, and pain had. Built long before anyone cared to look. They had given her the heaviest pack because they thought weight was all she was good for. They had given her silence because they thought she had nothing to say. But when the sniper fell and the valley demanded an answer, Mara Ellis did not argue. She did not explain. She did not ask to be believed. She simply reached through the dust and said, "Give me the rifle." And after that day, no one on Bravo 2 ever mistook quiet for weak again. Because respect was never earned by the loudest voice in the room. It was earned by the one who stayed steady when the whole world started shaking.